informal, and I really want it to be a discussion around what you guys need to know. So if any point you guys have questions, please stop me. If it's not really relevant right now, I'll defer it to the end, but if it is relevant, I'll try and answer it now. I've left a lot of time for Q&A. My name is Paul. I graduated from Stellenbosch University at the end of 2008 with a BCom degree, so all the BComers, yay, we have a useful degree. Went to work in the corporate world for a year and a half before I decided to start my own financial services company, which bombed out after a month or two because my first client didn't pay, and it was rough after that. And then I suddenly found myself doing entrepreneurship. For me, there's a distinction between a self-employed and entrepreneurship. Self-employed is about selling your time. And entrepreneurship is about building processes that you can kind of depart from, and it runs by itself. So all of you here, I'm hoping you guys are aspiring entrepreneurs, as I still am, hoping to build a business that you can walk away from at some point in time. Cool. I've been doing the startup thing for the last 3 years. I've worked through about 10 ideas, of which 8 I've had to write off because I was just aiming too high. I didn't have enough resources. It was very unrealistic, and so on and so forth. And the 2 that I'm involved in now, Edge Campus and Edumentals, we're kind of past the idea stage. We figured out what we're trying to build and who it's for. And so our next challenge is figuring out how to take it to market, hopefully which will be done in the next 2 months. The one product you guys are very familiar with, hopefully by now, is Curio. That's the assessment tool that we've been building. Some of the guys have been very helpful in the feedback that they've been giving me. So if you guys are here, Jacques, Marie, I see you're here. Who is Michael Barnard? Is he here? No, not you. Not yet, okay. And the last guy, Charles Best? Neither, okay. I wanted to say thank you, but... Okay. So in addition to the startup experience that I've had, I've been privileged enough to catch a glimpse of the inner workings of a number of other startups. What's been fascinating over the last 3 years is to see how, it turns out to be something different from what you started off with. What you had on paper, what you had in a document, what you had in a spreadsheet doesn't turn out to be that. It turns out to be something completely different. When we started Edge Campus, for example, the company that's now making Curio, we started off by wanting to do a career guidance program in high schools. Nothing to do with technology, nothing to do with mobiles. Now suddenly, 3 years later, we're in the mobile space developing an assessment tool. I've been asked to do a talk or a lecture on this topic, can your project make billions? Actually, it was called something else, but I decided to make it exciting because the original topic was boring, costs and revenue. Yeah, guys, I want to do that. I'm not an expert in this matter, so please don't take me seriously. All I'm trying to do is give you food for thought. What I'm trying to do is provide a pragmatic approach to assessing the financial viability of the idea. As I said before, I see this as a very informal speaking opportunity, so feel free to stop me at any point in time to ask me questions. So Philip asked me to talk about this topic last year, the cost and revenue, but fortunately I was away in Joburg, and so I could get out of it. This time around I had no excuse. And so here I am giving a talk on the exciting topic of revenue and costs. However, as I spent time figuring out what to speak about, I realized that the focus should be more than just making sure that you know where to put the right numbers. Drawing up a revenue and costs document and spreadsheet is really simple to do. I mean, if you look at the template that you guys were given, I mean, with the help of Google in this document, if you can't figure it out yourself, then to be honest, you shouldn't be in this competition. You guys are all studying or have a degree, you're full in the numbers where the names go. So the mechanism isn't that difficult to get right. So what I wanted to focus on was to speak about some of the things that you need to think about before getting to input the numbers. I'm going to be explaining why you need this tool, this spreadsheet or this document, and how you should be using it. But before we get to that point, something I found last year when I was asked to be a first round judge for this competition was the lack of a foundational framework for thinking about startups. This year, it's been much improved in my opinion. You guys have the business model canvas to give you a framework, but I'll get to that just now. So we start off this presentation with some very positive news. Your idea is destined for death. The default status for your idea, unless you do something about it, is death. Ideas die because of a lack of drive, lack of skills, too ambitious, lack of resources, wrong timing, and so on and so forth. There are so many reasons for an idea not to work that it's amazing that it ever turns into reality. The best analogy that I have is that you're in a desert with a backpack of supplies and your goal is to get out of the desert alive. You don't plan for the amazing food you're going to eat, the awesome holidays you're going to take, and the long list of books that you want to read, while stranded in the desert with no idea how to get out. Thinking about those things is foolish and sometimes downright dangerous given your limited time and resources. Your number one goal should be to get out of the desert, away from the immediate danger of extinction. So moving back from desert to reality, your focus, if you're in the idea stage, should be to answer the following questions. But it's not a matter of putting answers down on a piece of paper. You need to be able to validate that your answers are realistic and within the reach of your capability. So what are the questions? What are you building? So what is it? A product? Is it a service? Who are you building it for? What does your average customer look like? How are you going to get it to them? Is it going to be internet sales? Is it going to be through retail? Is it going to be couriered? And lastly, how are you going to make money from it? And is it going to be sustainable? So at the idea stage, your priority should be to figure out the answers to these questions. Worrying about profitability now is, I regard it as a silly exercise because you're assuming a lot in getting to that stage. So befitting to the intro, I've renamed the title of my talk to Can Your Project Survive? Your goal as a startup is not to make billions, it's to survive. You can worry about the billions when you've got answers to the previous questions and your product is well on its way to generating revenue. So I'm going to assume that most of you are here. You have an idea that you're passionate about and are confident that it will work. It's sitting in your head on a piece of paper or in a document on your computer. Here are some immediate problems. You've only spoken to your mom about it. Of course, she's going to be very objective and give you a proper sense of how well your business is going to do. The 50% month-on-month growth that you're assuming because you post links onto Facebook is actually conservative. SIC got 1.4 billion views in a matter of months. Why can't you create something that goes viral like that? And lastly, you only need 1% of the market. It's a good thing you're aiming at 1% of the human population because 1% of 7.5 billion is a big number. The only thing that your idea currently shows is how far removed you are from reality. What you have going up in your head is not the reality that you're faced with every day. The distance is huge, and the first step is to acknowledge that the distance is far. Then you can work on figuring out how to implement a strategy with subsequent actions that bring reality closer to your dreams. More often than not, though, your dream will be brought down to earth very quickly as you realize how difficult it is to bring an idea into life. Though the future is uncertain, it can be broken down into different levels of uncertainty by looking at the assumptions that you're making about the future. These assumptions need to be tested and validated because different assumptions have different associated levels of uncertainty. You need to make a decision on what you're comfortable being uncertain with and figure out how to reduce the uncertainty of your other assumptions. So you're comfortable that you have these set of skills that you can build your app with. What other skills do you need but don't have? Where are you going to get it from? What can you assume about that? Is it a friend that you can rely on? If it's not a friend, is it someone that you can outsource the work to? What are you assuming about that? In the case of your idea, if you assume incorrectly, you will make an ass out of yourself and lose a lot of time and money, just as I did, and I'm still currently doing with my startups. Keep an objective ahead about you and know when to hold on to an idea and know when to discard it. That's very important, guys. Know when to hold on to it and know when to discard it. And that's only going to be brought about by investigating your assumptions. Your number one goal is to figure out if you have enough information to push forward with an idea. So it's not to make money. Let me reiterate that. It's really important because this is something that I got wrong over and over again until I realized what the purpose of this stage is. is to get enough information to figure out if you should be spending more time on it. If not, if you decide to discard the idea, your decision must be either to switch over to a completely new idea, and some of you have a number of backup ideas, or it's a matter of just changing some aspect of it. For example, change the revenue model. So instead of using a sales model, you can move over to a subscription model. Plenty of companies who switched over to that model became very successful. The cost structure. Should you keep your costs internally and take the risk of things not being done on time, or should you outsource it? You know, there's a fixed cost associated with the development of a certain aspect of your product. Changing target markets. It may not be ideal for the consumer market. Maybe you should go after the business market. Distribution channel, changes in distribution channel. Instead of going through retail, go over the internet, and so on and so forth. Sometimes an idea requires a very tiny tweak in order for it to become successful. You need to know your idea and the assumptions that form the foundation for your idea very well in order to be able to adjust for the reality it faces. For an entrepreneur, I believe that one of the most critical skills is exactly this. You need to be able to identify which opportunity to chase or to leave very quickly and very efficiently. There are so many ideas and opportunities facing an entrepreneur. I mean, this gentleman over here had 8. So how do you figure out which one you chase after? You guys all have different areas of expertise and passions. But even within those limitations, there are so many things that you can build. I spoke to another guy involved in this competition. He had 3 that he wanted to put in, and each requiring a boatload of work to get off the ground. Which one should he put his effort behind? To be able to assess an idea, 1, you need to know what you're capable of. 2, what resources you have access to. 3, what resources it would take to chase after the opportunity or an idea. And lastly, how difficult it would be to bridge the gap between the two. So we move on to the business model canvas. This is what you guys have been given. The business model canvas is a great tool for breaking your idea down into its various components and for understanding the flow of your business. It's a great way to break down a business plan into core components by asking some key questions. So what are some of the questions that you're asked? So 1, who is your customer? What are you going to be giving your customer? How are you going to get it to them? And how are you going to build them a relationship? Or how are you going to build it and maintain it over time? What are the resources that you need in order to create your product? Your partners, your activities, and your resources. And then underlying all of this, what is the cost and revenue structure that support all of these activities? It asks you some really great questions. But the problem is, I find it lacking when it comes to execution. How do you start taking your idea to market or to reality? How do you turn it into reality from this page? What should you work on first? How do you go about finding customers? And one additional book that I'd like to recommend, and as a mandatory reading for today's entrepreneur, is The Lean Startup. Has anyone heard of this book or this movement? No? Okay. So The Lean Startup is an approach for launching businesses and products in a resource-efficient way by focusing on validating learning. So it's something I've been saying over and over again, and I will continue to say over and over again. Your goal is not to make money, it's to learn. To learn as quickly and efficiently as possible about what you want to build, who you want to build it for, and how you're going to make money from it. Then you can worry about getting into market and scaling it. So this book was very helpful in the sense that it got me to think in the correct way for a startup, because a startup mindset is completely different from the mindset required to grow a business and then also to maintain a business. So the general principle behind the lean startup is that done is better than perfect. So the best idea on paper is worth nothing compared to something that's actually sitting up in the market and something that your customers are using. But there is an important caveat behind this statement. The definition of done is primarily determined by your customers and what they need, and not by you. It's a big difference. This leads us to the definition of a minimum viable product. So what is a minimum viable product? It is the version of a new product which allows a team to collect the maximum amount of validated learning about customers with the least effort. So it's a minimum set of features that you can put out there that a customer is willing to give you something for, whether it be attention, time, or resources, or money, that enables you to learn something from that experience, so that you can do what? build the next iteration of your product. So the lean startup cycles consist of 3 stages, and it's traditionally, oops. Sorry guys. It's build, measure, learn. So you build something, measure the responses to it, and then learn from the responses so that you can go into build stage again. But the process is slightly more complicated than that, and that's why the second layer is there. And that's also why it's in a cycle, because it is all dependent on each other. Because the question you've got to ask yourself is, how do you know what to build? How do you know what to build? That's an open question. You've got a great idea. How do you know what to build as your first iteration? Or do you wait until you build it until it's perfect? I mean, that could be 3 years down the line. You start off by figuring out what you want to learn. What is your hypothesis around your product? Are you assuming that people will be using this in the classroom? Where will they be using it? Are you assuming that you'll be earning money in this or that way? What are you actually assuming? Then you've got to figure out what metrics you need in order to support what you're doing. So the metrics that you need in order to figure out whether your assumptions have been validated or rejected. And then lastly, once you've framed that, then you build something to be able to get that information. So at the end of the day, for the scientists here, it's actually rather easy to see that it's very experimental. Start off with hypothesis, and you build an experiment to see if your hypothesis was confirmed, validated or not. So what I want to do now is work through a case study. Does anyone know of Zappos? One. Do you know the story behind Zappos?
No, not the story.
Okay, so a very interesting story. This guy, Nick Swinburne, I keep forgetting his name, it's a rather bizarre name. In 1999, started an online retailer for shoes. Now that doesn't sound extraordinary, except for the fact that in 1999, very few people were buying things online, and shoes is a just completely different department because you want to try on your shoes. Why on earth would people buy shoes online? So the reason why he started this company was he was faced by a personal problem. He couldn't find a pair of brown Airwalks that he wanted in his local mall, and he figured out, why isn't this available on the internet? So just to keep a point of reference, Amazon only started in 1995 and wasn't even close to being a roaring success by 1999. So it was a big thing to suggest to figure out if people would be willing to buy shoes online. So what did he want to learn? So that he realized the number one. Okay, let me put it closer to you. What do you think he had to figure out? What are his big assumptions that he needed to validate?
Who else felt the same way?
Who else felt the same way? Okay.
Buying shoes.
Okay. Something more concrete than that? Not felt the same way?
Who wants to buy shoes online?
Who wants to buy shoes online? Okay. It's not just a feeling, because everyone, I mean, you can ask something, you guys will know. If you speak to people about your ideas and you ask them, how do you feel about this? They'll tell you yes, 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 yes. And then when you ask them for the money, they'll be like, no, not so much. So it's a big difference. Okay. So he wanted to learn if people would buy shoes online. Everything else was secondary to that. If this assumption was validated, if this assumption wasn't validated, then no amount of complicated stocking systems, packaging solution, and customer service strategies could save his idea. So what was the metric he was going to use? Okay, so he wanted to validate if customers would buy online. It's not that difficult. Sorry, this is the obvious example. What was the metric he was going to use?
Clothing.
Clothing? No, she's selling shoes. So how many pairs of shoes can he sell? He wanted to find out, will people buy shoes? And a metric for that is, if he does something, can he find out how many people bought shoes from him? So he wanted to learn that, he wanted to use that metric. What do you think he ended up building? Suggestions, what would you build, given that those are your restrictions and your assumptions that you want to validate?
Prototype.
Prototype? What exactly was this prototype though?
Website.
Website? Doing what?
Well, electronic commerce website to e-retailer.
Okay, but you must remember back in the day, you had to build your own thing from scratch. You couldn't just get a theme for your commerce store and then deploy it and then you're up and running within a couple of hours. What would you do?
Act as a in between, like a retailer.
Okay.
So you wouldn't necessarily stock the shoes, but you would supply them so that you can search and see if there's a valid demand.